Hello. So I had been thinking about getting the Rephr Shodo brushes for a while. I was very interested in them when they released, and one of you kindly gave me your feedback on them, and so that was kind of the deciding factor to get them, and they are now here. So this is going to be an unboxing. I don't know if I'm going to edit in another part to this video where I've already tried these out, or if that'll just be a separate video, but this part will at least be an unboxing, and then I will get back to you once I've used these for a little bit. So let's go ahead and get these out of the box. Now, as you can see, there isn't really any padding or anything in here, which I always think is weird considering these are like very delicate brushes. This isn't the first time that Rephr or other brush companies have sent me brushes in a box without any padding. So it seems to be kind of standard, but it always surprises me. So just FYI, this is the packaging that I got this in, and I guess I'm saying if I were to package this myself, I would probably put some tissue paper or something in here so that these aren't just, rolling around in here. But that's just me. Okay, so I don't know exactly what order these are in, but I'm going to try to go from the largest to the smallest. And then we can do the shader brush last. So this looks like the biggest one. Yeah, this is the Shodo 4. And as you can see, these kind of splay out. I know that these were kind of described as calligraphy brushes, but these are not kind of calligraphy brushes I've seen before. Because as you can see, these almost have a stippled end to them. Like they look like, I know some people say like they look like they haven't been bundled correctly, but they just look very fuzzy at the top. Instead of, my camera doesn't want to catch it for some reason. But I think you can see it when it's splayed out. It's just not, the bundling just isn't even, and I think that's intentional. It's like you have this, the overall shape kind of comes to a point, similar to, so this is the Goss E3. Although this one's a lot less chunky than the E3. Actually, let me compare this to the E2. Actually, yeah, this is going to compare much more nicely to the E2, but I'll keep all three in frame. But you see how the Goss ones come to a very fine point? And then the one from Rephr is just kind of, almost looks a little bit frazzled at the ends. And so this is actually the reason why I wanted to purchase these, was because as much as I like these Goss brushes, I feel a lot of pressure from the tips. Like there's a lot of precision to these brushes. They give you a lot of control. But in that, there's also a lot of power in the tips of these brushes for the size of the tips. They're almost kind of like an extended pencil brush, which has uses, but for me, when I'm putting on eyeshadow, I mostly just don't want to feel the brush. I want the brush to be small enough that it doesn't feel too big in the crease of my eye. But I also kind of want it to be soft. I want it to feel soft. And these brushes are just a bit too firm for me. I like them, but I think I like them more for placing pigment. I don't like them so much for buffing out pigment. And I was kind of wondering if the Shodo brushes would give me that. So anyway, it's a long introduction to this first brush. All right, so here's the Shodo 3. Very similar to the Shodo 4. There's really just a very small size difference. Very, very small. Yeah, they're otherwise, it looks like they're a very similar brush. Maybe the Shodo 3 has a little bit less of a point to it. It's hard to tell. I think it's just a tiny bit smaller. Okay, and this is the Shodo 2. This one feels very wispy. There's a lot more beefiness to the first two brushes. But this one feels much more delicate and wispy. Yeah, and there's a pretty big, like, thickness difference. I guess that they're the same, they're kind of the same length, or they look the same length to me. It's interesting. Between the first two brushes, there isn't much of a difference in, like, girth. Like a little bit, a tiny bit. I don't think you'll be able to see it on screen, but you can see a tiny bit in person. And the Shodo 4 is a bit longer than the Shodo 3. But again, I think that there's a much larger difference between the 3 and the 2 than the 3 and the 4. All right, in the Shodo 1. This one seems more tapered to me than the others. There's more of a point to it. And it doesn't feel quite as wispy as the 2. It's still a small, wispy, delicate brush, but there's something about the 2 that's just very, very wispy. And I think I like that wispiness. All right, that's all of the crease brushes. And now for the laydown brush. Now this one, if I could have gotten these separately, individually, there's a decent chance I wouldn't have gotten this laydown brush. I guess I don't really see the point of having the wispiness to the laydown brush. I get it in the crease brushes, because I want to have that wispiness that actually goes in the crease and buffs out stuff, but this seems weird since it's really the sides that you use rather than the tip. So I don't know. I don't know what I'll think about this brush. It feels soft though, although I haven't had this on my eyes yet, so we shall see in terms of quality. But I think just looking at these, okay, I think I have these in order. Here we go. You know, it's funny, these don't seem to have as much wispiness as I thought that they would. Like when I go back through and just feel the tips of these, the two smaller ones seem to have actually a lot of pushback, a lot of snapback, I think, as some people say. And it's really the 3, or is this the 3? Yeah, the 3 has the kind of the least amount of snapback and is the most fluffy up top. And then, yeah, in the 4, even though it appears to be the fluffiest, there's a fair amount of snapback here too. So I'm interested to see what these are going to be like using in the crease of my eye. Because I am a little bit afraid that these are going to be kind of just Rephr's version of the Wayne Goss brushes. And if that's true, I'm probably just going to prefer my Wayne Goss to these. But just feeling these, they feel nice. I think I have to have these on my eyes to tell whether or not these are any better or worse of quality than what I've had from Rephr before, but just looking at these seem fine. All right, so I'm going to go and test these out a little bit on my eyes, and I'll come back and discuss them a little bit more. So I thought that just playing around with these on my eyes, I would be able to get a feel for them. But honestly, all I can say is these feel very small on my eyes, and in a good way. These don't feel large, and they don't feel like they're pressing on my crease or my lids at all. So that's a good sign. But I think I'm going to need to work with these a lot before I can tell you anything about them really, which kind of makes sense. I will say, as I was kind of putting these on my lids, I didn't really feel any prickliness, which is nice. I feel usually Rephr brushes, usually there's a little bit of prickliness to them, and I don't love that. I didn't get that from these, and I don't know if it's because they're just so airy, or maybe they're a higher quality than what I've gotten in the past. I don't really know. But these feel really nice. I'm gonna have to use them a bit to see if they remain that way. But as for right now, I'm actually pretty pleased with how these feel on my lids. Now, what I want to do is compare these to a few other brushes. So let me bring those over. All right, so I wanted to do a little comparison between the Shodo brushes, really the crease brushes. I'm not really comparing the 00 to anything in this. And some of the other crease brushes that I might think of when I see these Shodo brushes, and specifically I wanted to compare it to the E2 and the E3 from Wayne Goss. So all of these in order from this side over to this way. This is the Shodo 00, the Shodo 4, the Shodo 3, the Shodo 2, the Shodo 1, the Wayne Goss E2, the Wayne Goss E3, Sonia G's Crease Pro, Sonia G's Goat Hair Crease One, and Sonia G's original Squirrel Hair Crease One. So it's interesting. I kind of thought that the Shodo brushes would be almost a copy and paste of the Wayne Goss brushes, and they're different. They're a little different. The Wayne Goss brushes are much more tapered at the tip than the Shodo brushes. The Shodo brushes they have that similar shape. They're not quite as tapered. They're a little bit more towards like a candle shaped brush than a true super tapered brush like what Wayne Goss tends to enjoy making. And I don't know if that's going to be a good thing for me or a bad thing for me. I do tend to like very, very tapered brushes. And my only issue with these two is the E3, the larger one, is just, I think it's just too large. It's a little bit too large. It's a little bit too dense for what I want in this kind of a brush, using it in my crease. I think that this would work really beautifully for someone who has larger eyes than I do, but I have small eyes and they're hooded, and they're a little bit set back in my face too, so I think this is just a little bit too big for me. But I like the idea of it. I think I would like this brush if it had the same shape, but it was just a lot less dense. Now the E2 I actually like a lot. And my only issue with it is, again, it's just a little bit more dense than I would like. And specifically in the tip. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but it's not fluffy. There's a lot of precision to this brush. And there's a lot of density to the fibers. And I think I would really love this if this was less dense. Now, this isn't as dense as the E3, so I like using it, but it's not as versatile as I would like. It's not as good for me for blending things out. And you know, I'm also noticing, looking at these two next to the Shodo brushes, the Shodo brushes are just thinner. They're just overall smaller, I think. Let me line these up a little bit better. Yeah, like none of these are as big as the E3 from Goss. Even the Shodo 4 is quite a bit slimmer. So that will probably work in my favor, because the Goss E3 is just too big. It's just too big for my crease. So that's interesting. And actually, it's funny because the largest one from Rephr, the Shodo 4, next to the Goss E2, the Shodo 4 kind of looks like a longer version of the Goss E2. I think the Shodo 4 is also a little bit thicker, but not by very much. It's kind of hard to tell. And I think this is too close for my camera. And it's more fluffy. It doesn't have as much stiffness to it as the Goss E2. And I think you can see that in just the way that these splay. Like, look how much more splay there is on the Shodo 4. So that's interesting. So I think the fact that these are smaller than the Goss brushes that I have, I think that'll be a good thing for me, because my main issues with, well, the main issue with both of these brushes is that they're both just a bit too stiff, and that stiffness comes through the point a bit too much, and then the E3 is just too big for my uses. It's just too large of a brush. And so I like that these are slimmer. I think that'll be really nice. So coming over to comparing these to some of Sonia G's brushes. So I have the Crease Pro, Crease One, and then the squirrel hair Crease One. Part of the reason that I don't love Sonia G crease brushes is they're also very dense. They're very stiff. And so I don't think I ever use this, the goat hair crease one. This one really is like an extended pencil brush. Like, there's a little bit of fluffiness at the end, or at least a bit more than what you'd find in most pencil brushes, but you can still get, like, you can still use the very point of this. It's very smooth and it's very soft, but it's stiff. There's a lot of density to this. So it gives you a lot of control, but I don't really want that control. I want softness. So let me see if these really compare. I think these two are probably going to be the closest, just in size. I think it's the the Shodo 3. That's probably closest in size. But you can see how there's like very little splay with the Sonia G. It really just kind of keeps on trying to come to that point, that very crisp point. Whereas the Shodo 3, it splays out. It's very interesting. And the Shodo 4 does the same thing. So these are very different brushes, and in fact, I never use this Crease One brush from Sonia G, and I'm wondering if I should try to use this as a pencil brush. But honestly, I'll probably end up decluttering this one. It's just not the kind of brush that I use, which is sad. I was drawn to this because it is so pointed, and because I think at the time I couldn't find the Crease One brush that was in squirrel hair, and I thought that this would be the goat hair version, but the goat hair version is just so different. It's just so stiff by comparison that I don't really use it. So that kind of leads into the Crease One. Now, Sonia G recently re-released this brush alongside the pencil one and the smudger one. Now, I already have this brush and the pencil one, and I purchased a backup of this brush, and I finally get to get my hands on the original smudger one. So those will be interesting, but part of the issue with this brush is it is squirrel hair, and so I have to be very careful with it. But at the same time, this has probably been my favorite crease brush. And when I got the Goss brushes, and this is the E2, I was really hopeful that the Goss brushes would be kind of the goat hair version of this brush. And I think in many ways it kind of is, but I think the way that this brush translates to goat hair doesn't work for me because then it's too stiff in the tip. Whereas that kind of works for me with squirrel hair because squirrel hair just, it needs to be bundled in a way that gives it a little bit of stiffness because otherwise it can just be very floppy. But I didn't like the way that it translated to goat hair. And I do think that, I mean, Sonia G did make the Crease One brush in goat hair. But I don't think that this brush is similar at all. I actually do think that the E2 brush from Goss is similar to Sonia G's original Crease One with the squirrel hair. I think it actually is a pretty accurate translation into a goat hair brush. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of a difference with the size and everything, but I think the feel is actually very similar. But I actually don't appreciate the light stiffness of the brush when combined with a goat hair bristle. So I don't know, maybe I should have just bought a whole bunch of these crease brushes and just done that, but what's the fun in that? But I really do like this brush, and my hope is that these brushes are going to be a better translation of Sonia G's Crease One into goat hair. And I think if they do it, it's because they're just going to be so different. Because I think a direct translation of Sonia G's Crease Run brush into goat hair just doesn't work. Because of the stiffness of goat hair, because of the just difference between goat hair and squirrel hair. So it's interesting though. It's interesting how the Rephr brushes are just so much slimmer than I expected. I just think that's interesting. Because it's really these two brushes that are going to have the same thickness to this one. So I kind of wonder if all of these are going to work for me in terms of size then. I don't know if any of these are going to be too thick, which I like, because I fully expected the two bigger ones to be too thick, but I don't think they will be. So I'm excited about that. All right, so last comparison, and this isn't a great comparison. This is a very different kind of brush. This is Sonia G's Crease Pro, and I like this brush for what it is, but to me it's kind of just a smaller Blender Pro, and that's kind of how I use it. It's great for blending out stuff in the crease, but I don't like placing pigment with this because it doesn't really come to a fine enough point, so I can kind of put this in my crease, and basically I'll have like in the furthest part of my crease, it won't necessarily get any pigment until I like start moving this like back and forth a lot. But this is just not pointed enough to get in the back of my crease, but it is great for blending things out. But what I do like about this brush is it is a little bit more airy than some of Sonia G's other crease brushes. It's just a bit thicker than I would like because it doesn't come to a point. Like if I compare it with these two. Like you see how it's a bit thicker than these? And you see, like this one splays out at the end a little bit more if I really press on it. Not quite in the same way that these two do, but more so than the crease ones. So that makes me excited too, because that means that these are probably going to be good for blending. And I already figured that because of the stipple shape to them. But they're also slimmer than the Sonia G, so that's good too. So anyway, these were just some quick comparisons between the different brushes that I already have and these new Rephr Shodo brushes. I hope this was helpful. I'll have a follow-up video. Yeah, I'm already at 30 minutes. I need to edit this. I'll have a follow-up video with a more in-depth explanation of these brushes, my experience with them, how I think that they compare in function to the other brushes that I have. And if you have any specific questions in the meantime, please feel free to ask them and I can try to answer them in the next video. But anyway, if you made it to the end, thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And I hope to see you in the next one. So bye for now.